Thank you so much, Paul, for that kind introduction. And I am so grateful for your friendship.
Thank you.
And before we start this evening, I just want to celebrate all the work that you have done through the years. And I know the personal sacrifices that you've made to help elevate other people and give people the opportunity to transform their lives just as you have done. And I think all of us celebrate your life and the many sacrifices that you've made. And I know that you have changed thousands and thousands of lives because of your investment in those people. And Marion, congratulations on your new position. And I'm so excited to hear that PBNSG has now crossed the 9,000 member number. And I just want to tell you that it's just the beginning. It is just the beginning. And your idea of creating some more virtual communities and reaching out will only increase this group to an international group in a very short period of time. And any way that I can support you, it would be my honor. And to all of you tonight, welcome. Thanks for taking time out of your night. It's just so great to be with you tonight. And I hope we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to walk through a presentation that I put together, entitled "The Power of Plants to Change Just About Everything." And so there's some scientific language in here. Don't worry, we're not going to take a test at the end of the night, so you don't have to remember some of the terms. Really, it's just an opportunity for you to be re-inspired about the power of plants, to maybe learn a few new things that you didn't know before, and to gain a greater appreciation for the incredible ability of plants to reach all the way down to our DNA and transform our lives. And when we consume plants as a population, to see that plants can actually transform our world. And so it gives greater purpose to our meals. I think when we can begin to appreciate the incredible ability of plants to bring healing and regeneration at every part of our lives and around the world. I'm going to start our presentation this evening. And I want to make sure that we leave plenty of time for questions. So I'm going to go for about 45 minutes or so, and we'll move quickly along. And I always find that the Q&A session is probably one of the most important things. So I'll really make sure that we have plenty of time to get your questions answered. I'll just ask you to buckle up. It's going to be a fast ride as we go through these slides, because we're going to work our way from the cell to the globe. Sometimes as we begin to look at research and understand, it seems so complex, and it can become burdensome to try and understand all the research around plant-based nutrition. And when I started this journey about 18 years ago, and I asked myself the question, what is the best diet to reverse disease? I started digging into the literature, and this is what I found. It's a mountain of studies. There are lots of experts. There are hundreds of diet books asserting to be the diet that, finally solves the weight loss problem, that cures your diabetes. But at the end of the day, despite the large number of studies they often quote, they fall short. And so I've spent 18 years kind of paring through the research, trying things and taking some risks in my practice to change my practice over to a plant-based nutrition lifestyle medicine practice. And I've really discovered the truths. And the truths are what you already know because of the amazing group that you're a part of and the information that's frequently presented to you. And so while we're going to go through a number of studies, the truths are self-evident, as you will see. Tonight, we're going to just go through 7 lines of evidence of the power of plants to change just about everything. We're going to start at the biochemical level, all the way down at the atomic level with atoms, electrons. We'll work our way back up through the genes, the epigenome, and the telomeres. We'll talk about cell biology, complex biologic systems like the microbiome and blood vessels, angiogenesis. We'll just highlight some of the randomized control trials. These are the studies that look at measuring the effect of a plant-based diet on diseases like heart disease and diabetes and type 2 diabetes, irritable bowel, reflux disease. We'll look at the next level up, which is the study of nutrition on populations, epidemiology and meta-analysis, looking at populations or groups of studies. We'll talk a little bit about the impact of plant-based nutrition on healthcare, and we'll end with a short conversation on why growing plants is the best way to begin changing agriculture and our environment. And hopefully by the time we end in the next 45 minutes and the ride comes to a stop and you can unbuckle your seatbelt, you'll have a wonderful appreciation for the plants that are resplendent on your plate every day. So we have this amazing opportunity every day, 3 times a day in America and around the world, at least twice a day, to choose what we put on our plates. And there are many things that impact our choices. Oftentimes it's habit. Sometimes it's just simply tradition, the way that we grew up. Sometimes it's food cravings. Sometimes it's emotional eating. Sometimes it's traditions and celebrations. Sometimes we eat because we're bored. There's a lot of different influences that ultimately change what we put on our plate. But it's a beautiful opportunity, and it's a free will choice that we make. And the great news is that by changing the food that's on our plate with each meal, we are not only investing in our lives, but we're investing in the people that we're connected to, because our health certainly impacts those people directly connected to us. We're impacting our communities, as we see with Paul's life, as he changed what was on his plate, and his transformed life has transformed the community and is reaching around the world now. And as we'll see, the choices that we make about the food that we purchase has an impact on the farm families, on the ground and the soil that the food is grown in, and ultimately the stewardship of the environment and the agriculture that we are giving to the next generation. So I like to look at this plate as a plate of opportunity every day. It's this incredible choice that we can make to create a regenerative plate, to make choices that bring life and regeneration every day, along with a really delicious meal. Now, every year we eat about 2,000 pounds of food, and that's the same weight as this little Chevy Volt. So it's incredible to consider that, we're eating bumper to bumper the same poundage as a Chevy Volt. And when we think and consider the impact, you say to yourself, what is the impact of 2,000 pounds of food passing through my body every single year? What's the impact of all of those nutrients, either positive or the substances in animal products and processed food negatively? The combined cumulative effect of 2,000 pounds of that food passing through your body, being absorbed into your system, and finding their way all the way down to your cells. And that's what we're going to explore from the positive side, the impact of that 2,000 pounds of food being absorbed into your system and finding its way down to the smallest levels of your physiology and biochemistry. And as I mentioned just a minute ago, food is really at the center of a web. It's an ecosystem in our world. Everything is connected to food, from your own personal health to the way that you feel, the clarity that you have each day mentally, your body's ability to resist disease and heal itself, your job, your activities, your hobbies, your service. It impacts your work. It impacts your colleagues at work by your own health or diseases we all have experienced in our lives. The food that we put on our plate, as I mentioned, it impacts agriculture, environment, healthcare, economies of countries. Everything is impacted by this plate. And, when we put the right food on the plate, the entire web is healthy. And then finally, as you all know, food is more than just an intervention for disease. Food is more than just something that tantalizes our taste buds and treats our emotional pain. Food is really meant to bring us together in community. Food and a delicious meal are meant to be shared together. They're meant to bring closeness and conversation between people. And food is meant to bring us back into relationship with the world. By appreciating the food and the way that it's grown, the people that grow it, and by appreciating food and the way that it's prepared and the people that have touched and handled that food and brought it to our table, and by appreciating the food and the people that are around our table, we begin to eat and live from a place of gratitude. And that's one of the most powerful emotions that will ever grace your life. But our world has shifted into eating food like this. And even looking at this, I would imagine that you have an emotional response to that food. It feels and looks selfish and heavy and ugly. And that's exactly what it is. And that's how our world has shifted over the last 100 years. This is just a summary of the consumption of food from 1909 to 2007. And we've added nearly 135 pounds of sugar and sweeteners in that 100 years per person per year, 70 pounds of oil. We've added more than 100 pounds of meat and 15 pounds of fish, 30 pounds of cheese. We've increased our calorie intake by more than 500 calories per day. And this is the shocker, 53 gallons of soft drinks. That's a bathtub full and a half of soft drinks. And this has happened slowly over time as industry has changed the foods that are available on the shelves. Restaurants have changed the food that they're selling. And we have all as a culture gone down this cultural current of food that has led to this excess of sugar, oil, meat, cheese, calories, and soft drinks. But the good news is there's a life in plant-based food. And the life that is in plant-based food changes everything, as we're about to see. So let's just start at the atomic molecular level. We're going to talk about electrons, and we're going to talk about inflammation, and we'll see that plants even impact all the way down to the molecular level. So we all heard about free radicals, and just to explain free radicals, a free radical, as we see, is the loss of an electron right here. So a normal oxygen atom loses an electron, and that loss of an electron sends the atom looking for an electron to bring stability. And so that free radical then passes through the cell membranes, causing cell damage. It passes into the DNA in the nucleus, causing DNA damage. And then it passes into the mitochondria, the little powerhouses of the cell, and causes damage to the mitochondria. So it's like a mini tornado passing through the cells, creating injury and inflammation along the way. We see these free radicals. Here are the reactive oxygen species that you see in the middle, the red, and they activate. This is a complex slide, but I just want to highlight that it activates these key inflammatory switches like NF-kappa beta that lead to carcinogenesis at the bottom. So we have free radicals caused by UVA, UVB lights, by food, saturated fats, by processed foods, and the preservatives in processed foods, by heme iron and other molecules in meat. They all cause these reactive oxygen species, the free radicals, turning on inflammation and moving the body towards the formation of cancer. We also have another source of inflammation that comes from animals, which is very interesting. These are bacteria in the top left-hand corner that come from meat. They're bacteria that are associated with meat and meat production. And the outside of the bacteria is a shell that can break up and create these small little pieces called endotoxins. And this is a very interesting study and a trial in humans where they gave them endotoxins and measured their inflammatory markers in the top, IL-6 and TNF-alpha. And they also measured social disconnectedness and depressed mood after the time of injection. And we can see the strong correlation here that, after they injected and gave them the endotoxin, in about 3 hours, there was a spike of inflammation in the body. And at about the same period of time, between 2 and 3 hours, there was a spike in feelings of social disconnection and depression. And this is because inflammation doesn't just occur in the heart or the liver or the knees. Inflammation also finds its way to our brain. And when our brain is inflamed, called neuroinflammation, we can begin to experience feelings of social disconnection and depression and even anxiety. And so we can see that it's the meat that is a driver of inflammation. at this kind of molecular level. But a beautiful whole food plant-based meal filled with antioxidants and phytochemicals combats those free radicals in a number of exciting ways. The colors in the greens that we just saw contain polyphenols, as most of you know, your well-educated audience. The polyphenols are the antioxidants and phytochemicals that make up the reds of raspberries, the blues of blueberries, the greens of kale, and the purples of purple kale or purple cauliflower. Those polyphenols contain a large number of extra electrons that serve as like a well of electrons that can find those free radicals and add an electron and help bring stability. So the polyphenols, they scavenge those free radicals. They also stabilize the microbiome, and they have an anti-inflammatory effect by turning off the inflammation that was caused by those free radicals. We also see that those polyphenols can turn off inflammation in other amazing ways. So as you're eating that beautiful salad with the blackberries and it finds its way down into your gut, the bacteria in your microbiome begin chewing on the fiber. And as they eat the fiber and they eat this delicious meal of fiber that you've just provided for them, they begin producing these byproducts called short-chain fatty acids. And what's waste to them is actually a benefit to us. One of those byproducts is butyrate, as you see here in the blue arrow. Butyrate produced by the gut bacteria finds its way back into your bloodstream and does a number of amazing things, not only stabilizing your blood sugar for 4 hours, but it finds its way down to these key switches like NF-kappa beta, and it turns off this switch of inflammation. When that switch is turned on, it impacts more than 400 genes in your body that are involved in inflammation, but switching that off turns off those genes and helps to mitigate the risk of all of these diseases that you see here. This was a really interesting study, again, to show how our body responds to the polyphenols, the antioxidants in these vegetables. So they took 2 groups of people and they fed one group a low quality whole food plant-based diet, fruits, apples, pears, grapes, melon, eggplant, potatoes, zucchini, French beans, etc. High quality diet was those fruits and vegetables that had much deeper colors, dark greens, berries, reds, plums, Swiss chard, Brussels sprouts. And they followed them over the course of 2 weeks and measured their inflammatory levels, the HSCRP we see at the top. We see that those that were on the regular diet of low quality fruits and vegetables had slight increase in their inflammation versus those that were on the high quality diet had a reduction in inflammation over the course of 2 weeks. Now, this is not saying you can't have some of these foods. We just had some at our dinner here at the dinner table, but it just tells us that we have to emphasize the high quality, dark colored, nutrient-rich fruits and vegetables because they do combat those free radicals and reduce inflammation. And we get free radicals from lots of different places. Part of it is just living. Our body generates free radicals as a part of metabolism. Exercising creates free radicals. So we have a natural exposure to free radicals, but these fruits and vegetables really come in and help to reduce those free radicals and mitigate the problem. So we'll move out of the kind of molecular level to the chromosome or the DNA level. So this is a chromosome, and I just want to highlight the green tips on the end of the chromosome. These are like the plastic caps on the end of your shoelace, and they're called telomeres. And the telomeres are involved in maintaining the health and integrity of the cell. It's been well documented that as these telomeres begin to shorten, that the lifespan of the organism shortens, and a shortening of the telomeres also related to diseases like heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, depression, etc. So this field of epigenetics, which you all are, I'm sure, have heard about before, is the study of how our environment impacts our gene expression. And it's been one of the greatest discoveries of the 20th and 21st century to understand that what we eat, how we live, what we watch, the stress that we're under, our activity levels, all turn on or turn off genes in real time. Within several months, we can turn on or turn off more than 500 genes in our body with lifestyle choices. And so the good news for all of us is that no matter how we lived in the past, we can change our future by simply changing our choices today. What's also interesting about this field of epigenetics is that the parents and even grandparents' choices turn on and turn off genes for the children and the grandchildren in the future. So it really is the greatest opportunity for us to give an inheritance of health by making good choices today and teaching our children to make good choices. We're creating a legacy that will go on for at least 3 generations. So this is Dean Orange's study that came out of his research looking at prostate cancer, published in Lancet in 2013. And what we see here is a picture of the pre-intervention plot of genes that were on or off, depending on the red or the green. And over the course of 3 months' time with a lifestyle intervention, they were able to positively impact more than 500 genes, turning on 48 genes that were involved in healing, and importantly, turning off 453 genes that were involved in disease processes. They also, for the first time, noted a 30% increased activity of telomerase. That's the enzyme that helps to maintain the integrity of that telomere at the end of the chromosome. So by turning on the telomerase, they actually documented that the telomeres got longer. And so it was one of the first studies that was done that demonstrated that the choices that we make actually increase the length of telomeres, which is essentially increasing the length and quality of life. Very, very exciting to know that we can truly change our destiny with the food that is on our plate every day. Also at this kind of genetic level, we talked about butyrate produced by the bacteria in our gut chewing up the fiber. So what happens that we feed our body this delicious food. The fiber is then again consumed by the microbiome and produces those byproducts like butyrate. And look at all the things that butyrate does here. So we know that it turns off inflammation, but butyrate, through the turning on or turning off genes, reduces the risk of cancer, has a significant anti-inflammatory effect, both by that main switch we talked about, and this other key switch in inflammation and cancer called mTOR. It has an impact on insulin resistance and obesity through this gene, PGC1 alpha, has an impact on cardiovascular disease and downregulates 9 genes that are involved in the biosynthesis of cholesterol. It upregulates the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is important in protecting brain health and growing new brain cells. It optimizes your immune system, and it actually activates your stem cells. And stem cells are an important component of regenerating cells in your body. So that plant-based diet that you had for lunch or dinner today is now being digested by your microbiome, and your microbiome is producing butyrate, and you don't even have to think about this. And the butyrate is finding its way into your body and doing all these wonderful things at the epigenetic level as you sit and listen to this presentation. Now, kind of moving out of the nucleus of the cell in the middle here into the outer part of the cell, we stop at the mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of the cell. These little mitochondria are just outside the nucleus of the cell, and they're really important in your health and activity every day. The mitochondria are really your powerhouses of the cell. It's like the nuclear power plant in your body. They produce all of the energy. They are the source of metabolism in your body. They also help to maintain antioxidant levels like glutathione, which are important again in reducing inflammation. They help to regulate cellular activity, and they also serve a protective role for DNA. The research in the last 2 years has shown that a whole food plant-based diet improves the efficiency and the number of mitochondria. Now, isn't that amazing? It actually increases the number of these mitochondria in your cells. It's called biogenesis. And so it's via the upregulation of this gene, PGC1 alpha. And what this is one of the reasons that long distance athletes and ultra marathoners are finding so much benefit in a plant-based diet. Their mitochondria, which are responsible for energy, are more efficient, and they have more mitochondria than their competitors that are on an animal-based diet. And so they are able to run longer and be more efficient and have fewer, have less soreness the day after. So it's really remarkable. I just highlighted here from the studies the other benefits of plants in optimizing your cell function. So plants reduce the fat that is inside of cells. So inside of our cells, we have some fat, especially muscle cells. And that fat, when it builds up, causes insulin resistance. Plants reduce that fat in the cells by more than 31%. It reduces the production of IGF-1, which is insulin-like growth factor 1. High levels of IGF-1 are related to the formation of cancer. It normalizes leptin and adiponectin, which normalizes your hunger signals and decreases your body's propensity to store fat. It reduces, again, that mTOR activation and cancer risk. It inhibits the microglia that are responsible for inflammation in your brain. So as you're eating your breakfast with oatmeal and a good green smoothie, those phytochemicals are finding their way into your brain, and they're turning off the sources of inflammation in your brain. It also protects against inflammation and cancer, and increases the production of nitric oxide, which I know all of you know very well from Paul's story. Nitric oxide is released in blood vessels and causes an opening of blood vessels and an increased flow of blood into vital organs like the heart. So as we move out of the cell into the systems, this is a beautiful picture of blood vessels. And the blood vessels normally grow in our body when we have an injury, and they can abnormally grow in conditions like cancer. So the system, the complex biologic system called angiogenesis, is a normal system in our body. And this picture that looks like a red tree is actually a picture of blood vessels, and it's an arborization of the blood vessels. They grow just like a tree, with smaller and smaller branches that reach out to perfuse all of the tissue in that area. We have a normal balance of angiogenesis, of growing blood vessels into damaged tissue and then pulling back and when the tissue is healed. But when angiogenesis becomes disrupted, we can have an excessive amount of angiogenesis, and we see that in conditions like cancer, psoriasis, arthritis, endometriosis, and we see too little angiogenesis, where blood vessels don't grow into places like chronic wounds, often seen in people living with diabetes, coronary heart disease, stroke, neuropathies, etc. And the balance can go either way, and it can go both ways. The idea is that the system is just out of balance because of an unhealthy diet and lifestyle. And this is really critical for cancer, because when angiogenesis is out of balance, blood vessels can grow up to those cancer cells, provide a source of nutrition for the cancer to grow more rapidly, and provide a means of escape for those cancer cells to metastasize around the body. So you have to ask yourself, if it's out of balance, how do we normalize angiogenesis? What can we do to bring that back into balance, to essentially starve cancer and cut off blood vessels, or to grow new blood vessels into those chronic wounds? Well, the research shows that when we eat like a beautiful bowl of berries, the phytochemicals, the anthocyanins and phenolics that are in berries that make them red and purple and blue, they change the VEGF, the communication molecules that are responsible for causing those endothelial cells to grow abnormally. and it shuts off the growth of those abnormal blood vessels to cancer cells. This is one of the reasons that we see in the research that the cancer cells that mild to moderate degree of cancer can be significantly halted in its growth by like the use of strawberries or berries or a whole food plant-based diet. It's because they are acting at that angiogenesis level among many other places. The Angiogenesis Foundation, run by Dr. William Lee, did a research study looking at the foods that optimize the angiogenesis system. And no great surprise, this is their list. It is a whole food plant-based diet. It's what we all had for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So as you're eating your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, not only is it doing all of the things that we've already discussed, but your breakfast, lunch, and dinner are optimizing your angiogenesis system in your body, cutting off blood supply to potentially cancer cells, growing blood vessels to those parts of the body that need healing. If we had a lot more time, we would dive in deeper on the microbiome because it is so interesting. And there have been so many articles published on the microbiome. It is an area that we're learning more about every single day. But a plant-based diet optimizes the microbiome, and it does so within a day's time. The microbiome is in constant flux, influenced by our diet, influenced by our sleep, our stress levels, our activity levels. And so there's a constant shift in the types and the numbers of bacteria that exist in our microbiome. And the populations and the colonies of bacteria can either be healthy populations or unhealthy populations. And when the unhealthy bacteria predominate, like we see down here when people are consuming animal protein, we have an overgrowth of these bad actors that begin to produce inflammatory molecules. I know many of you have heard of TMAO, that can contribute to things like inflammatory bowel disease and cardiovascular disease. We also know that people consuming plant protein can see a significant shift in the types of bacteria that live in their gut to these really healthful populations that produce short chain fatty acids, like we talked about earlier with butyrate. And those short chain fatty acids heal the gut lining and protect the gut barrier, avoiding things like leaky gut syndrome. They decrease inflammation. They decrease the risk of colon cancer. They improve your immune system. They interact with your brain and the gut-brain axis, and they help to improve mood and cognition. They produce so many byproducts that are beneficial to your body throughout. And it's just note down here, it's been shown that a high-fat diet adversely changes the types of bacteria which are associated with healthy metabolic states. And this is why a ketogenic diet is not beneficial. The microbiome in plants, also, I just wanted to highlight with this one, has precursors of neurotransmitters like GABA that are absorbed and find their way into the brain to impact the way that we feel and think. This is one of the reasons that the research has shown that people on plant-based diets typically have cognitive function at least 7 years better than somebody their own age. It affects our behavior, cognitive processes, brain activity for language, empathy-related tasks, emotional health, personality traits. Amazing what happens when we're eating plants and it's changing our microbiome. So as we step out now and look more at some of the randomized trials of disease, and you all have heard many of these from the experts around the country, and so I'll just summarize them. But a lot of the randomized control trials looking at using the intervention of a whole food plant-based diet have shown greater sustained weight loss in vegan groups at 1 and 2 years, improved beta cell function. Now, these are the cells that produce insulin in your pancreas. And so a plant-based diet improves the function of these beta cells, so they produce more insulin, and at the same time, it improves insulin sensitivity by helping to remove that fat from inside of the cell and reducing inflammation. The randomized trials I'll show you some of these have dramatically improved cholesterol and lipid levels, improved depression, anxiety scores, as we just saw with the microbiome, dramatically improved ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease in just 12 weeks, with a 36% increase of butyrate, that short chain fatty acid, at just 4 weeks time. And many people with IBS or IBD at pain entry have showed significant improvement in just 12 weeks. And this is really an important condition because so many people living with IBS and IBD do not have very good options for treatment, and they live with tremendous amounts of pain and disruption in their lives. And plant-based diet is really one of the long-term key solutions for them. As you all know, and just a quick note, as we like to always appreciate and honor those that have helped found this field. Dr. Dean Ornish, in his lifestyle heart trial, showed a 91% regression in angina or chest pain at 1 year versus the control group that was on the American Heart Association diet. Isn't that amazing? They saw an increase of 165% of angina or chest pain during that same year. On the right, we see a heart that's kind of looking up from the bottom, and the white arrow is pointing to an area of the heart that does not have sufficient blood supply. But in just 3 weeks' time, the image on the bottom shows that that area of the heart received a new blood supply. Now, how did that happen? This is another example of the angiogenesis and the benefits of plants in producing nitric oxide. Opened up those blood vessels, grew in some new blood vessels, and reperfused a part of the heart that was not getting blood and oxygen before that. The broad study done by friends of ours down in New Zealand, randomized controlled trial using plant-based diet in community for obesity, showed that they had achieved greater weight loss at 6 and 12 months than any other trial that did not limit energy intake or mandate regular exercise. So what was so important here is that they just gave people a whole food plant-based diet and did not tell them to manage their cut calories or exercise, but just eating a plant-based diet for many of the reasons that we've talked about just prior to this, normalized their weight at both 6 and 12 months. This is just a summary of the studies looking at the effect of plant-based diets on cholesterol and blood lipids. And we can see that, everything to the left is showing percent of improvement. And, the vast majority of the trials show dramatic improvements in total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, and some of them show an improvement in HDL. And some of the studies where there have been greater lifestyle interventions, like Ornish programs, show significant improvements in cholesterol. And this is really important because lots of people struggle with cholesterol. They think that they're born with high cholesterol. They can't do anything about it, take medications, and don't change their diet. And it's a perfect setup for not only heart disease, but other diseases like diabetes and cancer in the future. This is the Geico study from Dr. Barnard, another person that we always like to honor because he has done so much work and produced such great research. But this was the Geico study. And I just wanted to highlight that, not only did the Geico study result in improved body weight, plasma, lipids, glycemic controls of people living with diabetes, but they also found that people had fewer days missed at work. They were happier, their anxiety and depression scores went down. So their entire lives improved with the transition to a whole food plant-based diet. We began looking at studies of populations of people and communities. This was published in JAMA in 2016, and it showed that high animal protein intake was positively associated with cardiovascular disease, and a high plant intake inversely associated with all-cause and cardiovascular mortality, especially among individuals with at least one lifestyle risk factor. Similarly, again in JAMA 2017, their findings showed that the increased intake of certain foods and not enough of others was associated with half of all deaths in the US. The intake of plants directly mitigates that 50% risk. These are really interesting population studies looking at the total antioxidant capacity. So where do we find antioxidants? That's right, we find them in plants, the blueberries and the green kale and the asparagus and Brussels sprouts and broccoli that I just ate for dinner. So as we eat more of those plants, our total antioxidant capacity goes up. We have more of those antioxidants in reserve in our body. They have shown that when people have high total antioxidant capacity from a good whole food plant-based diet, that causes a significant reduction in all-cause mortality, stroke, hypertension, colon cancer, cataract formation, anxiety, depression, multiple sclerosis, acute MI in men and women. It was protective for people that actually had to go back in for CABG, the bypass surgery, and a lower risk of hip fracture in the elderly. So really remarkable findings that as you're eating more plants, it's impacting all of these different systems in your body positively. This is looking at, again, a large review, looking at plant-based diets on inflammation. And they found that their plant-based diets are associated with an improvement in obesity-related inflammatory profiles, and they would be the right means of therapy for chronic disease risk. Here's another one looking at plant-based diets promoting well-being for type 2 diabetes. And again, it shows their quality of life improved, psychological health improved, hemoglobin A1Cs, and weight. So again, it's the totality of life. And I really appreciate this and want to highlight this point because so often in medicine and healthcare, we become hyper-focused or myopic on one element. We want to reduce hemoglobin A1C, and so we develop new medications to reduce hemoglobin A1C, but we never stop to think about the impact on the whole being. But the beautiful thing about a whole food plant-based diet is you just change what's on your plate. It impacts not only your hemoglobin A1C, but the way you feel every day as well. This is an important study as well, just highlights in populations that as they are eating a plant-based diet, the dots, a healthy plant-based diet, the red line, or an unhealthy plant-based diet, the hashed line, we can see that the risk for heart disease goes down most dramatically with a healthy plant-based diet. That's a whole food plant-based diet. If we're eating a junk plant-based diet, which is very easy to do today, a lot of processed, meat analogs, a lot of chips and crackers, those unhealthy plant-based diets actually increase your risk of heart disease. We know that the refined flours, refined sugars, and oils will increase your risk of heart disease. Similarly, over here, we see that unhealthy plant-based foods and animal foods have a similar risk ratio for heart disease, but it's only healthy plant foods that reduce that risk. And then to make the same point for people living with diabetes, the risk for diabetes, we see the healthy plant-based diet in green results in the greatest reduction, but an unhealthy plant-based diet increases your risk for type 2 diabetes. And I really want to point this out and highlight this fact today because it's wonderful to see the plant-based message going out and hearing that even on the radio in grocery stores. But many of the plant-based foods that are being produced by food companies today may not be the best choice and may not actually end up reducing your risk of disease. So as we moved out of populations and we start looking at the impact of plant-based diets on healthcare, I want to just highlight a study that came out of Geisinger Health, which is a private health care company in northeastern Pennsylvania and northwestern New Jersey. This was the CEO at the time, Dr. David Feinberg, who said we should be investing in people and processes, not hospitals. And so they did. They created what's called the Fresh Food Pharmacy. And it was a partnership between local food banks, grocery stores, and the hospital, where they developed a team approach to the management of chronic disease that included a physician, a dietitian, a health coach, a pharmacist, and a nurse. And to test their theory, they identified patients with type 2 diabetes who self-identified with some food insecurity. They had trouble finding food or accessing healthy food. They found that their population in the area was actually a fairly high food insecurity population, 14% of the general population and 23% of the children. The initial claims data of this large group of patients revealed on average about $8,000 to $12,000 per month in expenses. And when we start to think, in the context of how many people are living with type 2 diabetes today, we can understand why we're facing a financial crisis in healthcare, both here and abroad. So to test the study, they said, okay, let's identify 37 patients that come from this population, and let's follow them over the course of the year. They gave patients food to cost them about $2,000 per patient to give them food for the week. And they found that the patients in this group had a pre-hemoglobin A1C of 9.6. Normal should be about 5.5. But after the study of 1 year, they reduced their hemoglobin A1C by 7 to 7.5, which corresponds to about a 40% decrease in the risk of death. And this is what's incredible. Their mean healthcare costs decreased by 80%. Isn't that amazing? From $240,000 per member per year to $48,000 per member per year. It was so successful that they opened another dozen of these across the region. It was written up in Harvard Business Review, and the research was published. And it shows the impact of changing what's on your plate. And if you just consider that, all of this money is now freed up inside of this organization to help more people achieve greater health. So it really creates momentum within healthcare systems. And we'll just finish the evening here just talking briefly about agriculture and the environment and the power of plants to transform the soil and the environment that we're stewarding for future generations. I just wanted to highlight the way that animals are produced today. And I know that you all know this, but sometimes it's good to just see it again, because every time I see the picture, it just highlights to me, the importance of eating plants, because this is really industry exploiting animals for profit, and people not really understanding where their food came from or the suffering that was involved in the food production. But as we can see, the resources that are consumed in producing this many animals for people to eat animals at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and the amount of waste that is also produced by these animals that has to go somewhere. It ends up finding its way into groundwater, polluting the land, and causing significant runoff and pollution of streams and lakes. But one area that we don't often think about in animal production is the antibiotic use in animals. And more than 70% of the antibiotics that are actually produced every year are used in animal production. Originally, they were used for the growth of the animals, but that was banned, but they still allow the use of antibiotics for the protection against disease. And so they still use them essentially for growth, but they just state that they're using against protection from infection. Now, when these animals are given antibiotics, the bacteria in their gut become resistant to the chronic exposure. When we consume the animals, we acquire the same antibiotic resistance that the animal had developed. And so it's now known that the most significant cause of antibiotic resistance in humans is the animal production and consumption of animals. So as we change to a plant-based diet, that eliminates the antibiotic resistance problem that's coming from the production of meat, and allows us to protect those antibiotics for use in infections in the future. This was an important study that was published in the National Academy of Sciences, 2018. It was the largest study that looked at 38,700 farms from 119 countries and represented about 90% of what we eat. And what's really amazing, and when we look at this, we see that more than 80% of the farmland is today around the world used for livestock, but it produces only 18% of the calories and 37% of the protein. A really disproportionate use of land for the production of food. but it also contributes to 58% of greenhouse gas emissions, water pollution, air pollution, and fresh water withdrawals. And it led the lead researcher to say agriculture is a sector that spans all the multitude of environmental problems. Shifting over to a whole food plant-based diet, we recapture all of this farmland and produce more than enough food for the global population, mitigate greenhouse gas emission, water pollution, air pollution, and through the right farming practices, we can actually begin replenishing groundwater. Animal production globally is leading to erosion. And if we look at the pictures of erosion around the world from farming practices that especially involve animals, we see that, especially in developing countries, they are experiencing tremendous levels of erosion, losing their precious topsoil as it's washing down rivers and streams. The sustainability studies have looked at the use of land and the protection of soil, as well as health. This was a study from Danish researchers that measured the health score of a diet and the sustainability score. And we see that a vegan diet has both the highest health score and the greatest sustainability score. So it's really the sweet spot on the plate. Dr. Walter Willett, one of the most famous dietary researchers, after producing the Eat Lancet trial, said this: transformations to healthy diets by 2050 will require substantial dietary shifts. Global consumption of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and legumes will have to double. And consumptions of foods, such as red meat and sugar, will have to be reduced by more than 50%. A diet rich in plant-based foods with fewer animal source foods confers both improved health and environmental benefits. And I think we would all agree that 50% is probably not enough. We need a much greater reduction, but 50% would be a good place to start and would certainly transform the land and allow us to hand over the earth in much better condition to our children and grandchildren. So as we conclude back to the plate, we can see that the choice that we have to make every day is exciting. By choosing plants and filling our plate with those beautiful bright colors, the wide variety of delicious tastes, we are transforming our bodies from the inside out at every single level as we enjoy a delicious meal. And by making that choice to purchase foods that are plants and that are grown, especially regeneratively, organically, we are transforming the land and changing the environment that we are handing over to our children. And they are the future generation. And we often, in the world of food, we often forget that when we eat, we are also eating for the future generation because of stewardship, because of epigenetics, and importantly, because our children are watching. More is caught than taught, and they are watching what we eat and they're learning from us. So by shifting over to a whole food plant-based lifestyle, we are demonstrating to our children how to take care of themselves and transform their lives and their families in the future. This is the Plantrician Project, and just a couple of highlights. Our website, if you'd like more resources, plantricianproject.org. It was an organization that we founded to reach out to healthcare providers to educate them about the power of plant-based nutrition to prevent, suspend, and reverse disease. We have an annual conference for healthcare providers, but everyone is welcome, pbnhc.com, and it will be virtual again this year with some amazing speakers. We created a free journal, ijdrp.org. Dr. Kim Williams is our editor-in-chief. It's an outstanding journal that will help you keep up on the research. And if you're looking for a healthcare provider, plantbaseddocs.com is a wonderful place to find a provider that has similar values and uses plant-based nutrition as a foundation in their practice. So I will turn it back over to Marion and Paul.
Everybody, let's unmute and show Dr. Scott our appreciation. What a wonderful presentation. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Bursting
Thank you,
hearts.
thank you, thank you.
Big hugs, virtual hugs. Hey, before we say goodbye, there's some questions, but I want to, if you guys know me, I'm a pretty random person. I've got just some random thoughts I'd like to share with everybody and maybe ask a question. So here's some random thoughts. First, I drink half my body weight in water every day. I recommend it to everybody here. Okay. I happen to do it throughout the day, mostly in the morning. Yes, I have to go to the bathroom quite a bit in the morning, but I'm telling you, I feel great all day and I'm not as hungry, but I'm just FYI, half your body weight in water. Okay, got that off my list. Next, just so everybody knows, at the high point, my cholesterol was 347.
Wow.
I know, everybody go, ooh, yeah, that's crazy. 347, which earned me the inability to take 7 steps. That's what I got for a cholesterol score of 347. Today, my cholesterol is 88. Wow, 88. And I could ride 20 to 30 mile bike ride every single day, never sore. Wow, pretty easy decision. Whole food, plant-based. Okay, got that off my list. Now, all right, so next thing is, okay, why aren't doctors talking about this? You know, we created a medical course material. We thought we were going to have it for medical schools, and politically, at the end of the day, when it came down to decision time, they did not have the guts to say, okay, we should teach all future doctors just a little bit. It was basically the 9 systems of the body. We had 4 talking points with each system. So we weren't asking them to get rid of something, just add something. And each one of the universities in Michigan came back and said, well, until it goes on the board, we're not going to teach it in the school. And I laughed and laughed at their faces. I did, and said, it's like, excuse the pun, chicken and egg, like what comes first? But at the end of the day, you know, it's like frustrating for me. Not only did I spend a year and a half of my life trying to create it, and it was beautiful. It was vetted by Dr. Michael Clapper and Brenda Davis. But at the end of the day, I was living proof that if you give up meat, dairy, and oil, you feel great every day. And I'm 110 years old right now. So how about that, huh? All right. But my point here is, it's political, okay? But if anybody knows somebody at the highest level, I'm very much willing to talk to you about it if we can get it into a medical school. It's still not being taught. All right, next one. Scott, I have a question for you. So you kind of stole it at the end for me, but like when people explain why are humans getting sick, and I always kind of give the analogy of, well, they put a lot of things in the ground so they could have a higher yield. Those things they put in the ground are not healthy for us, just the opposite. Then they feed that food to animals, but to keep the animals bigger, healthier, they put things in the animals. So they put kind of poisonous stuff into the animals, and they put it all together. And guess who gets to eat it? Us. Doesn't affect us right away, but over a period of time, no wonder why we got all these illnesses. Scott, is that a fair kind of analogy?
Yeah, that's a great summary. Absolutely.
Okay,
That's right.
Great. Okay, next one. I got 2 more and then I'll give it back to you guys. By the way, side note, I pay $1,400 a year for my medical. And last year I spent $200, and those were on well visits. Okay. So, I'm whole food, plant-based, no oil. And, I mean, someone's making a lot of money off me because quite honestly, I'm never sick. Okay. 2 last little things. The Plantrician Project. I saw that it's in Naples. When is it in Naples?
So the immersion is in Naples
Okay.
in the fall, and the Plantrician Project conference will be virtual this year. We decided to do one more virtual. So it's September 24th through the 27th, pbnht.com. And so virtual this year, and then 2022 will be in Palm Springs.
Wonderful. And I would love to participate. There, I just kind of pushed you into that one. Last thing, a little thing about PBNSG you didn't know, and then I'll open it up to everybody else. Thank you for bearing with me. So one thing you didn't know is PBNSG was a heart disease organization at the very beginning 7 years ago. And about 2-3 years into it, there was a decision I made. Do we go down the path of what other things could benefit, for example, diabetes, obesity, certain cancers, autoimmune, or I really had a passion. Here, I'll just show everybody this. You get a kick out of this. I don't know if you could see it. See that? That's my 16-year-old, the love of my life, Sophie. My wife has heard it enough. She doesn't mind. I'm in love with my dog. She's 16 years old, okay? And now I'm taking care of her. She took care of me for 14 and a half years. So I really wanted to get into animals and more importantly, the planet. Like my God, I've got grandkids now. I'm worried about it. But as an organization, we kind of wanted to stay in our lane and say, listen, what I came to realize, just so everybody knows, is this is shocking. Humans are kind of selfish people. And until we get the humans right, we're not going to save the animals and the planet. Just isn't good, in my opinion. So that's why we got into diabetes, obesity, and other health issues with the hope and the prayer that we're going to get enough people between Scott's efforts, my efforts, and others, that once we get to a point where we get healthier people, then by default, we won't have to consume and kill the animals and the planet. So there's a little background of, how we evolved. Enough of me. Does anybody have any questions?
We have some on the chat box.
Yep, I saw a couple of them. Mary, you want to go through them?
Sure. Dr. Stoll, the first one, somebody's asking, someone who is on a whole food, plant-based, no oil diet, what type of tests are recommended to check our heart health annually other than HDL, LDL, total cholesterol, triglycerides?
Yeah, that's really that's a good panel. And some of it depends on whether or not you have a family history of heart disease or a personal history of heart disease. You really don't need to do too much more than that. High sensitive CRP, HSCRP is a good measure of inflammation, and that can help to identify, chronic inflammation, and if so, where that would, try to identify where that's coming from. Some of the other scans that look at calcium scores, where they look at arteries, may or may not be helpful because it's looking for calcified plaque, which is old. Some people will also do ultrasound scans of the carotid if they have a risk of heart disease, and that can give you an idea of the health of your arteries, and you can follow that over time. So that's a nice, non-invasive, relatively inexpensive test that can be added for someone that does have a risk.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. The next one, somebody is asking about organic versus conventional produce. Do you feel it's a must to consume organic? Although she tries to use organic as much as possible, she worries about conventional produce and the damage it could cause to her body.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Thank you, Tracy. I always tell people, first, the most important thing is consume as many fruits and vegetables as possible. The research shows that when you consume fruits and vegetables, your body gets naturally healthier. And I don't ever want cost to limit somebody from making that choice to choose more fruits and vegetables. When you have a little bit more latitude in your budget, and incidentally, the research shows that a plant-based diet is about between minus 10% up to 10% more cost in your budget, depending on what you purchase. And even an organic diet, a plant-based diet, may only be about 10% more in your health budget, for food every month. And while we're on that point, one thing I like to highlight for people, and this really, I think, helps with mindsets around food costs. I always tell people to move your food out of your expense part of your budget into your investment category. Because when you spend money every month on your food, when it's whole food plant-based, you're actually investing in your future, and you're getting an ROI on that money, a return on your investment, because you're saving on healthcare costs, like Paul just mentioned. You're improving your health. You're reducing your need for healthcare in the future. You will get, in the near future, reductions in premiums. You feel better every day. There's so many reasons to move that out of that expense category, and it really changes the way that you think and feel about food when you think you're making an investment in your future. So the conventional versus organic, when you can afford it, the first step in is to just buy the Dirty Dozen list off of the Economic Working Group website, the 12 fruits and vegetables that are most likely to have high levels of pesticides. And then when you can, you add more fruits and vegetables. But what's really important to understand too is that organic produce is not just about reducing the amount of pesticides that you're exposed to, and we know that you do, but they found that organic produce has between 25 to 60% more phytochemicals and antioxidants. So with each meal, you're increasing your exposure to those really important antioxidants and polyphenols, like we talked about this evening, that have an impact on our microbiome, turn off genetic switches, turn off inflammation. So you're getting more with each meal, and the impact of that can be significant over time. And finally, there's some interesting research coming out of Rodale where they have taken conventional and organic produce that's grown side by side and looked at some of the phytochemicals that are available in the conventional versus the organic. And they found that the organic produce has phytochemicals that are not present in a conventional. One of those is called ergothioneine, and they found that ergothioneine is a potent anti-cancer effect in the body. It actually kills cancer cells. So by purchasing organic, you're actually getting exposure to things that you would not find in conventional produce. And then the last thing I would just mention is that when you're buying organic, you're also supporting the farm families that are not being exposed to pesticides. And there's a lot of research that shows that farm children that grow up in conventional farms have higher degrees of leukemia, lymphoma, birth defects, pregnancy issues. So you're supporting families and you're supporting regenerative agriculture.
If I could, let me just add two other thoughts, which is I talked to Dr. Michael Greger, who's going to be coming on very soon to the stage. He said, listen, everything being equal, just eat fruits and vegetables. And Scott, I could not agree more, with the Dirty Dozen. But if you're kind of thinking, what should just eat fruits and vegetables, then start picking the organic side. And then when it comes to the cost issue, I look at it like I have a choice. I'm either going to invest in my food or invest in insurance and the cost of sickness. So the more fruits and vegetables, beans, and whole grains I eat, the less I'm going to be sick. And knock on wood or whatever. I haven't been sick in like 6 years. Feels pretty good. Okay.
And I was just going to add from personal experience that when the farmers markets are open, even though something might not be listed as organic, if you talk to some of your local farmers, the produce actually is organic. They just can't name it that because they haven't gotten that certificate. But if you talk to the farmers, and a lot of that produce is not considered conventional.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Marion. And also it's less expensive at farmers markets.
Yeah, and it's fresh.
Fresh, and you can actually grow some of your own too. That's the cheapest produce that you'll ever produce.
Oh, yes, definitely. And you can start now, get those seeds spread.
That's right.
The next question, it's a question and a comment from Kim. She had an angioplasty and 4 stents in December. As she was leaving the hospital, she was told to follow a Mediterranean diet. She left, and her sister talked about a plant-based no oil diet, and Kim then saw huge drops in her cholesterol in only 3 weeks. Now she's asking, why don't doctors talk about this? And I know Paul mentioned it too.
Yeah.
But do you have anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, that's exactly why we started the Plantrician Project, because doctors like myself are not taught these things in medical school. It's not information that we ever come in contact with in residency. And so we just don't know. We don't know better. And it's very difficult to find out this information. When I started this in 2003, it took me a couple of years just to figure out what to recommend for my own family and my patients to prevent, suspend, and reverse disease. But today, with the work of Paul and PBNSG, Plantrician Project, PCRM, Dr. Greger, this information is finding its way to doctors, to medical schools, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. So you will see in the next 5 years a huge swing in the number of doctors that are recommending plant-based diets.
I hope so. Kim is also asking people with CAD. She's heard that they should not eat nuts or avocado. What do you think about that? Or maybe once a week, a Brazil nut?
Kim, you know that this has been a little bit of a dicey issue in the plant-based world and a controversial topic. You know, it's very interesting. I tell people that there is not enough information out there to take a super confident stand on this one. So there are research studies that show that you can reverse heart disease without any nuts, seeds, avocados. There are studies that show the reversal of heart disease with people eating small amounts of nuts and avocado. And so I really don't believe that anybody can dogmatically say you can or cannot have nuts and seeds. When we look at studies that come out of the Adventist health trials and other large epidemiologic studies, nurses' health, physicians' health studies, there is a strong association between eating a very small amount of raw nuts or seeds, small amounts of avocado, and the reduction in cholesterol and reduction in heart disease by substantial amount, 50 to 75% reductions. So epidemiologically, looking at associations in large populations, there appears to be benefit eating small amounts of nuts and seeds. And with that, I always caution people, nuts and seeds is not eating, trail mixes and nut bowls at home. It's using the seeds as a garnish on a salad. It's sprinkling some hemp seeds on a smoothie bowl. It's using, a small amount of nuts in a recipe. So it's you're using them in small amounts. And in that way, I think there can be a lot of benefit, especially seeds have a lot of minerals that can be advantageous.
Let me just add to that, just so everybody knows what I do. I add like a tablespoon of sesame seeds or rather sunflower seeds raw to my salads. Okay, just as a garnish, as Dr. Stoll said. Secondly, every couple of weeks, I'll take a handful of walnuts, and just maybe 6 or 7. Listen, let's be real. I love pistachios. If I could not just have one, I'd have the bag. Okay, I could not have one cashew, I'd have the bag. No, that's not what you do. But just a little handful, perfect. Okay. So and as far as the guacamole, the avocado, to me, I used to love it. I look at it just like once a great while as a treat if I'm at a place or that's where I go. Just a little background for those people who follow Dr. Esselstyn. The backstory is he was always no nuts, no nuts, no nuts. Well, I talked to him a couple months ago and I asked him specifically, is that okay? He goes, well, the main reason why I tell people no nuts is that I know people go nuts about nuts. So I'd rather just say don't have any nuts than say it's okay to have a few because people go nuts about nuts. So saying all that, that's what I do. Just moderation.
I agree with that. It's easier just to sprinkle on a salad than open a bag and eat.
That's right.
Any other questions, Marion?
There's one more.
Okay.
Somebody is asking, for those people who are meat and dairy eaters with normal labs, what 2 or 3 tests should they get to help assess atherosclerosis in the body? They think a CT calcium scan is good, but isn't that just showing if there is hard plaque? They are trying to help an omnivore make changes when he thinks he has nothing to be concerned about.
Yeah, that's really good. We all run into these people that think they don't have any problem because the doctor ordered the basic lab work and it appears to be normal. So yes, the CT calcium score really is a look at old calcium buildup in the arteries that is calcified. It does not look at soft calcium plaques, which can be readily present in somebody. You can have a normal calcium score and have a buildup of soft plaque that still can rupture and cause an aneurysm. So a CT calcium scan does not, you can't say from a CT calcium scan that you do not have atherosclerosis. I would also just add in there a couple of things. One, some people may not be predisposed to heart disease, but they may be predisposed to cancer, to type 2 diabetes or dementia in the future. And so just because you have normal cholesterol levels and a normal CT calcium scan does not mean that you are not at risk for cancer, for type 2 diabetes, for autoimmune disease, or any of these other conditions. So I like to just put that into perspective for people to help them understand that normal cholesterol level does not preclude you from getting some other disease. I like to also order some lab work that looks like at inflammation, like high sensitive HSCRP, high sensitive C-reactive protein. That's a good measure of inflammation. I like to do sometimes some deeper dives looking at the microbiome, which can give people a little better idea of where they stand. You know, if your microbiome is disrupted, you're at risk of increased disease. And then there's some other, you know, deeper dives in biochemistry, looking at omega-3 levels and some other more sensitive tests that can dig a little bit deeper. But I just think it's important, you know, in this person, I would just realize that, you know, you may or may not convince them based upon their studies, but, you know, it's not just about avoiding disease, but it's also the benefits of a plant-based diet. And so I always encourage people, as we just talked about tonight, to understand plants are healing your body, changing your genes. You know, for athletes, it is helping with recovery, it's repairing tissue. That's why Game Changers is such a great movie for omnivores, because they can see the benefits of plants, not just the avoidance of disease, all the way down to erectile dysfunction, recovery from injury, recovery from exercise, delayed onset muscle soreness. So you know, there are ways to really help, you know, convince somebody who may not be concerned about heart disease, but may be thinking about other elements of their life.
All right.
Yeah.
Everybody, can we unmute for a second and really give a final big round of applause, Scott? Better than I even thought. The bar was already pretty damn high, okay? It was awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Paul.